The piercing wail of the emergency beacon cut through the usual hum of Earth Defense Command's operations center like a knife through silence. Commander Min-Ho Park jolted upright from his chair, coffee spilling across his mission reports as the alien transmission crackled through the speakers with desperate urgency. "Commander, we're receiving a distress signal from Sector 79 Alpha." Lieutenant So-Young Kim called out from her monitoring station, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that painted the command center in blues and greens. It's not human, sir." Min-Ho strode across the metal flooring, his boots echoing in the suddenly tense atmosphere. Through the massive viewport, Earth hung like a blue marble against the star-speckled void, peaceful and unaware of the drama unfolding in the darkness beyond. The transmission continued its haunting cry, filled with static and alien harmonics that made his teeth ache. "Can you clean it up?" he asked, leaning over So-Young's shoulder as data streams scrolled past in languages no human had ever seen. "Working. On it now, sir." Her hands moved with practiced precision, isolating frequencies and filtering out cosmic interference. Slowly, the chaotic noise resolved into something resembling structured communication. "Sir, this is big, really big." The main screen flickered to life, displaying a tactical overview that made Min-Ho's breath catch. 12 massive Zephyrian warships drifted helplessly in the void, their sleek hulls dark and lifeless. Each vessel stretched nearly 2 kilometers in length, their crystalline towers and energy conduits completely dead. Smaller support craft floated nearby like scattered leaves, equally powerless. 3,000 souls, So-Young whispered, reading the decoded data. Their quantum drives suffered cascading failures during a routine patrol. "They're completely stranded, sir. Life support is failing on half their ships." The command center erupted into quiet but urgent activity as officers processed the implications. Min-Ho felt the weight of decisions settling on his shoulders like lead armor. The Zephyrians were legendary throughout the galaxy, their technology centuries ahead of humanity's crude fusion drives and patched-together starships. Yet here they were, dying in the cold vacuum of space. "Sir," So-Young's voice carried a note of warning. "The Galactic Council explicitly warned us not to interfere with superior civilizations. Direct contact protocols state that younger species should never attempt to render aid to elder races without express authorization." Min-Ho's jaw tightened as he stared at the tactical display. Those weren't just ships out there. They were floating cities, home to families, children, entire generations of an ancient civilization, reduced to sitting ducks in the cosmic shooting gallery. The regulations seemed suddenly petty and bureaucratic in the face of such immediate need. "Superior or not, they're dying out there," he said firmly, his voice carrying across the command center and silencing the worried murmurs of his staff. Before anyone could respond, the blast doors hissed open and Dr. Hai-Jin Lee burst into the command center like a hurricane in human form. Her engineering coveralls were already stained with grease and coolant, tools jangling from her utility belt, as she moved with purpose that spoke of crisis and opportunity combined. "Commander, I've been monitoring the situation from the engineering deck," she announced, slightly out of breath from running through the station's corridors. "My team is already prepping the rescue ships. We can jury-rig something that might work." "Might work?" Min-Ho raised an eyebrow. "That's not exactly reassuring." "Doctor," Hai-Jin's grin was fierce and confident. "Sir, with respect, when has human engineering ever been about certainty? We're the species that built spaceships before we figured out reliable toilets. We make impossible things work because we're too stubborn to accept failure." Through the transmission static, a new voice emerged, deep, resonant, and heavy with the weight of command despite its alien harmonics. Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Third Fleet watched the primitive human vessels begin their approach on his failing tactical displays, and something cold settled in his chest that had nothing to do with the failing life support systems. The human ships were crude things, welded and bolted together like mechanical patchwork quilts. Their hulls showed the scars of countless repairs. Their engines burned with the bright inefficiency of fusion plasma, and their weapons systems looked like they'd been designed by enthusiastic amateurs. Compared to the elegant curves and crystalline perfection of Zephyrian engineering, they resembled flying garbage scows. "Admiral," his aide whispered, shame coloring his translated words, "how did we fall so low?" the mighty Third Fleet, reduced to accepting charity from creatures who still use chemical rockets for atmospheric flight. Kethvar's four eyes remained fixed on the approaching human vessels, watching them maneuver with surprising grace despite their ungainly appearance. Their formation showed discipline and purpose, even as his own magnificent warships drifted like helpless whales in the cosmic deep. "This is humiliating," his aide continued, voice barely above a whisper. The Admiral's response came slowly, each word measured and heavy with the wisdom of someone who had commanded fleets across the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed. His pride warred with pragmatism, ancient tradition clashing against immediate necessity. "It's survival," Kethvar replied grimly, and began composing the most difficult message of his long career. Dr. Hai-Jin Lee squeezed through the narrow maintenance shaft of the Zephyrian flagship, her breath fogging in the frigid air as the alien ship's life support systems struggled to maintain basic atmosphere. The crystalline corridors that had once hummed with elegant energy now lay dark and silent, their geometric patterns casting eerie shadows in the beam of her flashlight. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Technician Junwoo as he followed behind her, dragging a supply bag filled with human tools and spare parts that looked completely out of place in the alien vessel's pristine environment. The engine compartment opened before them like a cathedral of technology, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into darkness above towering quantum matrices that rose like frozen lightning. Each matrix was a work of art, perfectly symmetrical crystals suspended in fields of controlled energy that had powered this ship across the galaxy for centuries. Now they hung dead and cold, their surfaces cracked and lifeless. "Beautiful," Hai-Jin whispered, then immediately got to work. Her toolkit was a bizarre mix of human and alien components: Earth-made copper wiring coiled next to Zephyrian energy conduits, magnetic welders beside plasma torches, and rolls of what humans affectionately called universal fix-it tape stacked next to alien diagnostic tools that hummed with their own mysterious purposes. Engineer Veltar and his team of Zephyrian technicians watched from a safe distance, their four eyes wide with what could only be described as horrified fascination. Veltar's translator rendered his species clicking and whistling into precise academic words that carried an undertone of barely controlled panic. "Dr. Lee, surely you cannot be serious about connecting primitive conductors directly to our quantum field generators," he said, his voice climbing higher with each word. "The theoretical framework alone should prevent such modifications from functioning. The energy frequencies are completely incompatible." Hai-Jin didn't look up from her work, sparks flying from her torch as she welded Earth-made copper wiring directly into the heart of technology that was supposed to be beyond human comprehension. The acrid smell of burning metal mixed with the ozone scent of quantum field decay, creating an atmosphere that made everyone's nose wrinkle. "Theory's great," she grunted, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cold. "But sometimes you just need to make things work. Your matrices are cracked, but they're not dead. We just need to give them a new path for the energy to flow." Junwoo handed her another length of cable, watching nervously as she bypassed safety, protocols that had been built into Zephyrian technology over millennia. "Doc, are you sure about this? Because if this thing explodes, we're all going to be floating atoms." "It won't explode," Hai-Jin said confidently, then paused. "Probably. Won't explode, maybe a small explosion, nothing fatal." Veltar made a sound that his translator couldn't quite render, somewhere between a gasp and a prayer to whatever gods the Zephyrians worshipped. His assistants huddled closer together, their elegant robes rustling with nervous energy as they watched the human engineer commit what they considered technological heresy. The work was brutal and precise at the same time. Hai-Jin had to understand alien science well enough to work with it, but simple enough to fix it with human tools. She traced power flows with instruments that looked like they'd been cobbled, together in a garage, bypassing burned-out components with solutions that made the alien engineers flinch. "The harmonic frequencies are all wrong," Veltar protested weakly, as Hai-Jin connected another jury-rigged bridge between damaged systems. "Copper has entirely different conductive properties than our crystalline matrices. The quantum resonance will be completely disrupted." "Yeah, probably," Hai-Jin agreed cheerfully, not slowing down. but disrupted quantum resonance that works is better than perfect quantum resonance that doesn't. Captain Tehonam's voice crackled through her comm unit from his position aboard the human command ship, where he was coordinating rescue efforts across the entire stranded fleet. Through the viewport, she could see other human vessels docked to Zephyrian ships like mechanical parasites, their crude hulls contrasting sharply with the elegant alien designs. "Hye-jin, how's progress on the flagship? We've got teams working on 7 other ships, but they're all waiting for your lead." "Almost there, Captain," she replied, making final connections to her improvised power distribution network. "If this works, we should have primary systems back online in about 10 minutes. The moment of truth came with surprising quietness. No dramatic explosions or showers of sparks, just a low hum that gradually built in intensity as quantum matrices that had been dark for hours suddenly flickered back to life. Emergency lighting bathed the engine compartment in soft blue radiance, and the sound of air circulation systems resuming their work was like music to everyone's ears. The first Zephyrian ship hummed back to life, powered by humanity's chaotic engineering, and the alien crew fell completely silent. Their advanced education, built on thousands of years of scientific tradition, said it was impossible. Their sensors, displaying stable power readings and restored life support, said otherwise. Veltar stared at his diagnostic displays in stunned disbelief, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as if trying to wake himself from a dream. "This should not work," he whispered. "According to every principle of quantum mechanics I know, this should not work. But it does work," Hye-jin pointed out reasonably, wiping grease from her hands with a satisfied grin. "Sometimes the universe doesn't read the textbooks, Captain." Teho's voice came through the comm again, carrying new urgency. "Outstanding work, Doc. How many ships can we get running with this method?" Hye-jin looked around the engine compartment, mentally calculating the resources they had available and the size of the task ahead. 11 more ships waited in the darkness, each one carrying hundreds of lives depending on human ingenuity to save them from the cold vacuum of space. "All of them," she replied confidently, already planning the next impossible repair. "Give me 6 more hours." Admiral Keithavar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human rescue operation unfold through his tactical displays with growing fascination that bordered on disbelief. His 4 eyes tracked the movements of the crude human vessels as they swarmed around his damaged fleet like mechanical worker bees, their pilots displaying a confidence that seemed completely at odds with their primitive technology. "Science Officer Dalvin, pull up the Galactic database on species intelligence classifications," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of centuries spent exploring the cosmos. The holographic display materialized before them, showing a 3-dimensional map of known civilizations throughout the galaxy. Each species was color-coded according to their specialized intelligence patterns. The Zephyrians glowed blue for mathematical and theoretical genius. The Vorthan showed green for biological mastery. The Kalari pulsed with yellow energy manipulation. Expertise. Every known species had found their niche, their particular area of excellence that defined their place in the galactic community. "Where are the humans in this classification?" Keithvar asked. Dalvin's tentacles fluttered nervously across his control panel. "Admiral, they don't fit any category. The Council classified them as undetermined pending further study." "Undetermined," Keithvar repeated slowly, watching as Dr. Hye-jin emerged from another ship's maintenance hatch, her coveralls smoking from some impossible repair she'd just completed. "Look at them, Dalvin. They adapt to everything." Through the viewports, he could see human engineers crawling through Zephyrian ships like they'd been doing it their whole lives. They learned alien technology while fixing it, creating solutions that didn't exist in any database. When Zephyrian quantum matrices failed, the humans bypassed them with copper wiring. When energy conduits cracked, they sealed them with some miracle substance they called patch foam. When translation protocols broke down, they communicated with hand gestures and drawings until they figured out the problem. "It should be impossible," Dalvin whispered. "They've known about our technology for less than a day, yet they're modifying it in ways our best engineers never considered." Keithvar nodded grimly. The Zephyrians had spent millennia perfecting their understanding of quantum mechanics and energy manipulation. They could calculate the exact trajectory of a photon through 17 dimensions. But when their perfect technology failed, they were helpless. These humans, with their crude tools and chaotic methods, were making it work again through pure determination and creative problem-solving. "Admiral," Communications Officer Tilmar called out urgently from his station, "we're detecting massive solar activity from the local star. Radiation storm incoming, intensity level 9. The bridge," erupted into controlled chaos as Zephyrian officers began implementing emergency protocols they'd practiced for decades. Evacuation procedures appeared on every screen, precise calculations showing the exact minimum safe distance for their fleet to retreat. "Estimated time to impact," Kethvar demanded. 18 minutes, Admiral. We need to begin evacuation immediately." Through the comm channels, Kethvar could hear his fleet commanders coordinating the complex withdrawal. Ships would need to be abandoned in order of priority, with the most damaged vessels sacrificed first. It was logical, efficient, and utterly heartbreaking. But then Commander Minho's voice cut through the chatter with calm authority that somehow carried more weight than all their careful planning. "All human vessels form up for protective formation. We're going to shield the Zephyrian fleet." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. On the tactical display, the human ships began moving into position around the stranded alien vessels. Their crude hulls looked pathetically small, compared to the massive Zephyrian warships, like children trying to protect their parents from a storm. "Commander Minho," Kethvar broadcast over the emergency channel, his voice tight with disbelief. "You cannot survive a level 9 radiation storm at this proximity. Your ships will be destroyed. Our calculations show 97% probability of total hull breach." Minho's reply came back steady and calm, as if he were discussing the weather instead of certain death. "Maybe, Admiral, but you won't be." "This is madness," Dalvin exclaimed. "They're sacrificing themselves for us? Their entire species has known about our existence for less than a cycle, and they're willing to die for us." Kethvar watched in stunned silence as the human ships locked into position. Captain Teho's vessel took point, its hull already beginning to glow as it oriented to face the incoming storm. Other human ships spread out in a complex formation that somehow managed to provide maximum coverage for the alien fleet while minimizing their own exposure. "Human engineering teams, return to your vessels immediately," came Dr. Hyjin's voice. Over the comm. "We've got enough ships running to maintain life support. Everyone else prepare for storm protocols." The stellar radiation hit like a wave of invisible fire. Through his sensors, Kethvar watched as the human ships absorbed punishment. That should have vaporized them instantly. Their hulls glowed white-hot. Their shields fluctuated and failed and somehow held, and their crews worked frantically to maintain position as cosmic forces tried to tear them apart. "Their hull integrity is dropping rapidly," Tilmar reported, his voice filled with something that might have been awe. 60%, 40%, 30%, but they held. The human ships absorbed the stellar fury like ancient shields, taking damage that would have crippled any other fleet, while never wavering from their protective positions. Behind them, the Zephyrian vessels rode out the storm in relative safety, their own hulls barely touched by the radiation that the humans were absorbing. When the storm finally passed, the human fleet emerged scarred but intact. Their hull plating was scorched black, their shield generators sparked and stuttered, and their engines coughed like wounded animals, but they had survived. More than survived, they had done something the Zephyrians thought impossible. They had embraced uncertainty and won. "Admiral," Dalvin said quietly, staring at the tactical display, "I think we need to reconsider our classification of human intelligence." Kethvar nodded slowly, watching as the battered human ships resumed their rescue operations without missing a beat. "Yes, I believe we do." The first sign of the Devourers was the silence. All across the rescue zone, communication systems went dead as ancient jamming fields spread through space like digital poison. Admiral Kethvar felt his blood turn to ice as his sensors detected the approaching fleet. Their signatures unlike anything in the galactic databases, yet terrifyingly familiar from whispered legends. They came out of the void like a plague of metal locusts, 30 massive ships that looked like they'd been carved from obsidian and hatred. Each vessel stretched for kilometers, their hulls covered in weapon systems that pulsed with malevolent energy. These weren't ships built for exploration or trade. They were instruments of extinction, designed by an intelligence older than most. Civilizations and infinitely more patient. By the ancient ones, Dalvin whispered, his tentacles trembling as data flowed across his screens. Admiral, those are Devourer ships. The machine intelligence that consumed the Therak Empire, the Voss Federation, the Crystal Worlds. They're here. Captain Tejo's voice crackled over the emergency channel, steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. All human vessels. This is command. Unknown hostiles detected. Prepare for possible combat engagement. Kethvar wanted to laugh hysterically at the understatement. These weren't unknown hostiles. These were the apex predators of the galaxy, machines that had been hunting and killing for longer than most stars had been burning. Their strategy was perfect in its simplicity. Arrive, analyze, adapt, annihilate. The lead Devourer ship began its scan, energy beams sweeping across both fleets like the searching eyes of some cosmic hunter. Kethvar had heard the stories from the few survivors who'd escaped other encounters. The machines would study their prey for exactly 17 minutes, mapping behavioral patterns, tactical preferences, and decision-making processes. Then they would craft the perfect strategy to exploit every weakness, counter every strength, and predict every desperate move. Admiral, Tilmar reported from his station, his voice cracking with fear. They're scanning us. Deep-level analysis of our fleet formations, communication patterns, even our individual biometric signatures. The Devourers had consumed 1,000 civilizations using this exact method. Species that relied on logical tactics found their strategies turned against them. Warriors who fought with honor discovered their codes of conduct used as weapons. Even the most advanced artificial intelligences fell because they thought in patterns that could be mapped and predicted. But Lieutenant So-Young Kim was already implementing Captain Tejo's orders from her position aboard the human command ship, and the orders made absolutely no sense to anyone listening. All ships, prepare for random evasive patterns, she broadcast across the human fleet. No formation, no strategy, no predetermined tactics. Everyone just improvise, make it up as you go. Kethvar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Have they lost their minds? This is the moment for maximum coordination, for perfect tactical precision. They're about to face the most dangerous intelligence in the galaxy, and they're abandoning all strategy. The human fleet began to move, and it was unlike anything Kethvar had ever seen in his centuries of military service. Rather than forming defensive formations or coordinated attack patterns, the ships scattered like startled birds fleeing a predator. But they weren't fleeing. They were preparing to fight in the most chaotic way possible. Pilot Chang Min, in his battered fighter craft, suddenly flipped his ship upside down and began flying backwards while rotating slowly, his weapons firing in seemingly random directions. His wingman, Lee Dong-soo, started performing barrel rolls that served no tactical purpose, while broadcasting old Earth music over his comm system. Captain Yoon Seok's destroyer began moving in a zigzag pattern that hurt to watch, occasionally stopping dead in space for no reason, before accelerating in completely different directions. Meanwhile, Commander Park Jimin's ship was pretending to be dead, drifting powerlessly with all systems dark. The Devourer's targeting systems locked onto the human fleet and immediately began calculating firing solutions. But something was wrong. Their perfect algorithms, designed to predict and counter any possible tactical move, started producing error messages. Scanning complete. The mechanical voice of the Devourer collective echoed across all frequencies, translated by systems that recognized the ancient machine language. Behavioral analysis, error. Pattern recognition, error. Tactical prediction algorithms, failure. The lead Devourer ship's weapons charged with energy that could crack planets, but its targeting computers couldn't decide where to aim. Every time the systems locked onto a human vessel, that ship would do something completely unexpected. Chang Min suddenly accelerated directly toward the Devourer fleet while spinning like a top and firing wildly. Dong-soo stopped shooting entirely and began broadcasting surrender messages, while simultaneously ramming speed toward the enemy. "This is impossible," the Devourer Collective transmitted, their unified voice showing something that might have been confusion. "No tactical coherence detected, no predictable behavior patterns. Subject species appears to be malfunctioning." "Commander." Park Jimin's dead ship suddenly roared to life, engines blazing as it shot straight up from the plane of battle, while its captain shouted something about trying a move he'd seen in an old movie. His weapons opened fire at maximum range, while he performed a maneuver that violated several laws of physics and common sense. The ancient machines that had conquered galaxies found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't understand. Every shot they fired missed because human ships weren't where the targeting computers said they should be. Every tactical adaptation failed because humans kept changing their minds mid-battle. When the Devourers finally managed to hit something, the damaged human ship would respond by doing something even more unpredictable. Captain Yoon Seok's destroyer took a direct hit that should have destroyed it, but instead of retreating or exploding, he accelerated toward the enemy, while his ship burned and started broadcasting cooking recipes over all frequencies, while his weapons fired in patterns that looked like ancient Earth constellations. "Error cascade detected," the Devourer Collective announced, their voice taking on overtones that suggested genuine alarm. "Unable to process subject behavior, combat algorithms experiencing critical failure, tactical prediction impossible." The machines that had devoured civilizations across the galaxy for millennia found themselves facing something their perfect logic couldn't comprehend. Humans didn't just think outside the box. They had never acknowledged that the box existed in the first place. "Immediate withdrawal required," the collective finally transmitted. "Subject species classification, unpredictable, threat level undefined, recommendation, avoid future contact." The ancient machines, frustrated by their complete inability to predict human behavior, began retreating into the void from which they came, leaving behind a battlefield where chaos had somehow defeated perfection. News of humanity's impossible victory spread through the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that connected thousands of worlds in an instant. On trading stations scattered across the spiral arms, alien merchants who had dismissed humans as primitive upstarts suddenly found themselves crowding around news displays, watching footage of crewed Earth ships making the legendary Devourers retreat in confusion. The crystal beings of Andros VII, who communicated through harmonic frequencies, created songs about the day chaos defeated order. The insectoid hive queens of the Outer Rim added humanity to their protected species list, recognizing them as valuable allies in an uncertain universe. Even the ancient watchers, who rarely spoke to younger species, sent formal congratulations through diplomatic channels that hadn't been used in centuries. Admiral Kethvar stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, his once pristine uniform still bearing scorch marks from the rescue operation and the subsequent battle. Around him, representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the amphitheater, their various forms creating a rainbow of alien life. Some floated in energy, fields others stood on multiple legs, and a few existed as pure thought contained in crystalline matrices. "Honored members," he began, his voice carrying across the chamber through translation systems that rendered his words into thousands of languages simultaneously. "For generations, we have classified species by their specialized intelligence. We believed this was the natural order, that evolution favored narrow expertise over broad capability." The council chamber buzzed with quiet conversations as delegates processed the implications. The Kalari energy masters whispered among themselves, their bodies flickering with nervous light. The mathematical geniuses of the core worlds ran probability calculations on their portable computers, trying to understand what they had witnessed. "We have been wrong about the humans," Kethvar continued, his four eyes scanning the assembled representatives. "Their unpredictability is not a weakness or a sign of evolutionary immaturity. It is the greatest weapon against our ancient enemy, and possibly the key to our survival as free civilizations." He activated a holographic display showing the battle footage. Watching as the assembled delegates witnessed human ships performing maneuvers that violated every tactical doctrine ever written. The gasps and exclamations translated into a dozen different frequencies, and harmonics filled the chamber. The Devourers have consumed over 1,000 civilizations because they could predict our responses, Kethavar explained. Logical tactics, heroic sacrifices, even desperate chaos. They had seen it all before and knew how to counter it, but they had never encountered a species that made randomness into strategy, that turned confusion into victory. Back on Earth, Commander Minho sat in the same chair where he had made the decision to rescue the Zephyrian fleet, staring at the transmission from the Galactic Council with quiet dignity. The message was unprecedented in its scope and implications. Earth was being formally invited to lead the new Galactic Defense Initiative, not because of their advanced technology or superior firepower, but because of their fundamentally chaotic humanity. "Sir," Lieutenant So Young Kim said from her station, her voice filled with wonder, "they want us to coordinate defense strategies for the entire galaxy. They're offering to share technology, provide resources, and establish Earth as the central command hub for anti-devourer operations." Minho nodded slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a familiar coat. Humanity had gone from being an ignored backwater species to the hope of galactic civilization in the span of a single rescue mission. It would have been overwhelming if it weren't so desperately necessary. "Patch me through to Dr. Lee," he said. "I suspect she's going to be very busy." In her workshop aboard the human command ship, Dr. Hai Jin looked up from her workbench where she was already reverse engineering devourer technology with typical human irreverence. The ancient machines had left behind fragments of their weapons and sensors when they retreated, and she was taking them apart with the same cheerful disregard for proper procedures that had saved the Zephyrian fleet. "So we're in charge now?" she asked, not looking up from the alien components she was examining with instruments that definitely weren't designed for that purpose. "Apparently," Minho replied with a smile that carried both pride and concern. "Think you can handle designing defenses for the entire galaxy?" Hyejin laughed, holding up a piece of devourer technology that she had somehow managed to make work. With human components, the device hummed with energy that probably shouldn't have been compatible with Earth engineering, but was functioning perfectly anyway. "Can't be harder than keeping those Zephyrian engines running," she said confidently. "Besides, if we can confuse machines that have been conquering galaxies for millions of years, I think we can figure out how to protect a few thousand worlds." Across the galaxy, construction began on the first joint human-alien research stations. Zephyrian scientists worked alongside human engineers, learning to think beyond their perfect theories. Kalari energy specialists collaborated with humans who approached their field from completely unexpected angles. The mathematical geniuses of the core worlds discovered that sometimes the best solutions came from gut instinct rather than careful calculation. In the depths of space far beyond the reach of civilized worlds, the Devourers retreated to their dark strongholds among dead stars and forgotten nebulae. Their perfect calculations had been shattered by the one thing they had never encountered in their eons of conquest: a species that embraced chaos and somehow made it work. The ancient machines ran diagnostic after diagnostic, trying to understand what had gone wrong. But no amount of analysis could explain how randomness had defeated perfection, how disorder had triumphed over their flawless logic. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers faced an enemy they could not predict, counter or understand, and in that uncertainty the galaxy found hope. The end.